Hello everyone and welcome to the new episode of Retail Talks. Today I'm alone, unfortunately, but Tina is enjoying her holidays. So Tina, if you watch us later for sure, have pina colada for us. Enjoy it. Yes, today we will talk about very interesting topics and I will do my best to squeeze it so that I don't need hours to explain what I have to say, but the topic is very interesting, I promise you. Before we start and before we go into the topic, let me do just two additional things. First, I want to invite you to enjoy our premiere. We probably you know already about FNN, which means Fiscal News Network. So tomorrow we will have a premiere at 12 o'clock Central European Time, and we will give you the most important news from the world of compliance, especially fiscalization, of course, and e-invoicing. Join us and let us inform you about latest news. So, as we started Retail Talks, we explained that Retail Talks is something that we call fast marketing. Fast marketing because we want to react very fast on the things that are happening in our industry, in retail. This is the reason why we will talk about something very special, what happened a couple of days ago. And this is, of course, in the fast fashion. And I will be very honest, as we decided to make something like fast marketing, our concept, let's say, that we used as an idea, as an example, was in the fast fashion area, in fast retail, fast fashion area. And that's why you should not be surprised that we will today talk about one of the leaders in the fast fashion retail, SHEIN. Last week, something happened. SHEIN opened their books. So this means we were able to see, or everybody was able to see, how the SHEIN is working actually, very deep into the business model and business details of SHEIN. This was very interesting, and today I want to discuss with you how do we see that actually, and why is that so interesting, and what is so interesting. But before we talk about numbers, which are related to or which are visible in the book, let me share with you some, maybe some context, let's say, which will probably be very interesting for you, as it is for me. First, SHEIN is a well-known company, but somehow, till yesterday, let's say, it was like a mysterious retailer, you know, coming from East, being very fast and conquering the markets very fast. And it is really incredible to see what SHEIN reached in such a short time. I will show you now a very interesting chart. And this is actually, these are the fashion companies, most of them you know, I'm sure. And you see that SHEIN is in the second place. And now you should know that they needed between 10 and 12 years to reach that place, so the second place in this chart. If you compare that with Inditex, and Inditex is of course the leading company in the fashion area in general, they needed 33 years to become number one. So we have on one side small SHEIN, not anymore of course that small, reaching the second place in 10 years, and we have the leader Inditex needing 33 years. So it's quite interesting. In this chart, you see just a part of the turnover which SHEIN actually did, because the service part, means platform part, is missing. So this is just related to the apparel which they sell. We will come back to that, and I will first, in order to give you, let's say, an overview, I will compare always a little bit SHEIN with Inditex, just to have a big picture and the context, and then we will go more in detail. I mentioned that the books were open, but the reason why the books were open is actually the IPO. So SHEIN is planning to go public in Hong Kong, and that's why one of the steps which are needed and have to be respected, have to be done, is to open the books, let's say. So the Hong Kong Stock Exchange published something that they called post-hearing information pack, and this is basically like a document consisting of lots of details which are very important for the potential investors, of course. And this is what is enabling us to see actually beyond opinions which people have about SHEIN. I'm sure that you have also opinion about them, and generally everybody in the world knows now SHEIN and thinks something about them. But the books are showing us some really interesting facts. This document is not finished yet, so it's like a interim document. So it's probably just a draft or something like that. And I'm sure that certain things will change, but nevertheless, the majority of the facts are quite okay, and we can still use it to understand the business. Let me give you a couple of facts which are helping us, let's say, to understand more about SHEIN, because I think if we just go deep into the detail about the numbers which are in those IPO documents, I think we will miss the big picture. I want to give you a context of those numbers, because then the understanding of the numbers will totally change. And that's what I promise you in this episode. You will see the SHEIN with different eyes, not just through the numbers which you can read, of course, in that IPO documents. So let me give you again some interesting facts in relation to the number one, which is Inditex. So SHEIN has 18,000 employees. On the other side, and they have no stores at all. On the other side, the number one, Inditex, has 163,000 employees. So on one side, 18,000. On the other side, 163,000. Inditex has 5,500 stores. SHEIN has no stores at all. So now you can imagine already that we have on one side very heavy infrastructure, which is basically with lots of stores and employees and so on. And on the other side, we have much smaller structure and probably much more flexible as well. So think about that later if we are thinking about and talking about numbers. Related to turnover, we just saw the numbers. SHEIN made around $41.08 billion together with services. And Inditex made around $39.8 billion, but much more profitable, let's say. So, but actually those numbers related to the turnover into the revenue are quite similar for the both companies. SHEIN has 281 million active users, active customers, and Inditex has 218. 218. So Inditex, it's very difficult to calculate those numbers on the Inditex side, because Inditex is not just online retailer and SHEIN is. So that's why it's easier for SHEIN to calculate the number of the active customers. But they are also very similar. SHEIN has around 250 million followers on the social networks across all of them. And Inditex has around 257 million followers. So it's also very, very similar. But now we are coming to the numbers which are totally different. SHEIN has more than 1 billion orders per year. I don't know how many orders Inditex has, but for sure much, much less. And now we have something really interesting. SHEIN is adding around thousands, and I will give you later the exact number, I have the number, thousands of new products every day. Can you imagine this system which is capable of adding several thousands of products every day? So this is very huge. So overall, we can see already on these numbers that all those numbers were reached for SHEIN within 10, 15, up to 15 years. We can see that SHEIN is like a rocket. They are flying to the moon. They are conquering the world, let's say. And now, during that flight, lots of things are happening around the world, and we will discuss this, making it very difficult for them. So this means what these guys are doing in the moment is during the flight, let's say, to react on the changes which are happening in the sky and changing and swapping the engines which they have, because they are just changing the models. And this is what we will discuss. What is actually happening? And how is SHEIN reacting on the situations on the market? And why do I think that they are changing the business model in the moment? But before we go in that details, let me give you just a couple of more things. I want to explain the challenges that this company is facing, because usually I don't think that many companies are dealing with this kind of challenges, especially if they are expanding globally. So let's start a little bit and talk about the history and the situation which they have today. They started a couple of years ago in US, of course, as nobody knew about them. And they competed actually with big players because the market in US is definitely saturated. So they had to compete with Zara, with H&M, and all other established companies, which had already hundreds of stores as well, means they were able to reach the customers. And on the other side, they had to compete with online companies like Amazon. So this is a very difficult situation. Nevertheless, they managed to become very, very successful in that market. Very similar picture was in UK. And I was very surprised. Just a couple of seconds before this live event, I had a chance to see a number for the UK, and I was totally surprised. 5% of all non-food online orders or sales are done by SHEIN in UK. This is huge. Okay, so they are very successful. They were very successful there. But last year, something happened. So the US introduced something which is actually limiting the possibilities of the people in US to import without import duties, the smaller parcels, smaller packages. So this means the SHEIN cannot sell like they did it before, because the customer have to pay import duties if the value of the goods are less than $800. This was the major business model for SHEIN. So that's why they are struggling, of course, today in US. But this is not isolated. So they didn't struggle, or they don't struggle just in US. A very similar picture happened in Brazil. And Brazil is very important, very large market for SHEIN. But Brazil changed the taxing strategies, very similar to US. And because of that changes, SHEIN starts struggling in Brazil as well. Okay, but in parallel to all that success, and you can imagine this is Chinese company, so probably there is something like, relationship to Chinese companies, which is not that good maybe. Beside all of that, they faced so many different critics, like related to the working condition, child labor, supplier transparency, even the region like Xinjiang, I hope I said it well, in China, and that region is producing the cotton. Even that region was in the game and telling that SHEIN is using the cotton from there, which is not that good, and so on. Environmental topics like waste, which is created through the fast fashion, synthetic materials, greenhouse gas, all these critics, and at the end, of course, copyright claims, which were quite a lot in US, UK, and other countries as well. This was a huge pressure on SHEIN. Now we discussed a little bit the western part of the world, but in Asia, the picture was not much different. If we take India, for example, India banned the SHEIN app in 2020, probably due to political relationship to China, I'm not sure. But without app, SHEIN was not able to sell in India. In Europe, the situation is really hard as well. So in April 2024, European Commission decided that SHEIN is a very large platform. And this means actually that they have a very hard, let's say, compliance rules that they have to follow. And they are just heavily under the supervision of the government. SHEIN tried to open the stores in Paris. Probably you know the story. It was not successful. Many reasons are probably there, but they were not successful. And France turned to be most difficult European market for SHEIN. Let me give you just a couple of facts why. They had to pay 40 million penalties concerning misleading discounts, 150 million fine due to data protection concerning cookies which they are using, approximately 22 million in additional penalties in this year, 2026, related to the order confirmation, returns, and product information. I think the safety topics was somewhere between those product information. Huge pressure regarding illegal or highly controversial products. I think in Paris, it was discussed something about kind of sex toys or something like this, and so on. And this is France, just in France. So that market is very difficult for SHEIN. But it's not just the case in France. In Italy, they had to pay 1 million fine due to misleading or incomplete environmental claims. So altogether, all this pressure and situation together made or create very, very, very difficult situation for them. I'm sure you know that they wanted to do the IPOs already before, so they tried in New York, and this was not successful. After that, they tried in London. This was also not successful, probably due to all these image things and challenges which were created. So it was up to till today, very difficult situation. And now I'm in the retail industry since 30 years. And to be honest, I never saw a retailer with so big challenges if they want to expand globally. I never saw that. Most probably it's so like that I also never saw that fast growing retailer. So probably they are really big threat to many of the retailers. So that's why maybe this complete situation is happening and these challenges are maybe created. But we should also understand that although those challenges are there, that company managed to become the second in the world. Respect. So it's not bad. So I think they are not just fast fashion company, but also ultra fast adapting company to the new situations. So this is like environment, or these are this is the big picture which I see. If we analyze now the numbers, I'm sure that the numbers will show now a different picture. So let's talk a little bit about numbers, and let's talk about the scale of the business which they have. So I mentioned they have $41.8 billion revenue in 2025, and they served around 273 million active customers. This was in 2025. In March 2026, means first quarter, the number of the customers which they serve increased to 281 million. So this is interesting. The number of customers is nevertheless increasing. Then they served 1.09 billion orders in 2025, and they added, and this is now the number that I promise you to give you, they add every day 4,700 new apparel styles every day. This is huge retail system from my point of view. On the other side, revenue in the first quarter of 2026 almost didn't change compared to 2025. So there is just a small change, which is 1.1% or something like that. So it's almost no change there. So let's talk a little bit about, I wanted to say religions, no, regions. One of the most important region is, of course, US. And there is a now big problem that I see, but it's explainable. The revenue declined by 14%. So this is a huge number, of course, but it's easy to explain. The reason is, of course, the change of the import procedure. So the customers have to pay now the import duties. I think the right word is de minimis, which are not existing anymore. And this led to the situation that the revenue is declining heavily. Of course, a very similar situation will happen in Europe, because Europe changed the same or similar rule or law, and SHEIN will, and they know already, they will also have problems in Europe, and they expect even bigger problems in Europe, because Europe has simply more compliance topics which have to be followed. At the same time, so we have two regions which are really big problem, let's say Europe and US. But at the same time, we see something else, which is what is very interesting. The other parts of the world represent in the moment 45.4% of the overall revenue. So this means they are shifting slowly the focus from Europe and from US to other parts of the world. And those other parts of the world means 45.4% revenue is growing 10%. Totally different than picture in US and Europe. Okay, so we see this kind of shift of the focus in the regional business. This is something which is explaining what's happening in a moment. But on the other side, some other changes are happening as well, and all of them can be seen, let's say, in the books. They are becoming less dependent on own products. Service revenue represented in 2023 only 2.7%. Now, in 2026, the same type of revenue, means platform-related revenue, represent and reached 14.3%. So there is a really interesting increase in that part of the business. And if I'm talking about service business, I'm talking about platform business, like taking the fees, charging the fees to the third-party companies to sell over the same platform. I think this is the most important number, and this is the most important strategical change from the retailer to somebody, to company offering commercial platform for others. This is very interesting. There is even in those documents, there is even message from the SHEIN management that the margins on this part, service part, is double that high as the margin in overall or the margin of the overall business. This is very interesting. Okay, so these are the part of the changes, but this is not everything with what we can see in the books. The second or third change which we can see is related to the dependency on the apparel. Actually, as I mentioned, I've introduced them as a fast fashion retailer, means they're depending on apparel. And this was true. In 2023, 68.8% of the revenue was created with apparel. Nowadays, in 2026, the apparel part of the revenue decreased, and now it's just 61.4%. So there is also strategy to move from the fashion, let's say, into other categories. And this is what we can see now. SHEIN is including topics like, or products and items from footwear, accessories, beauty, home, lifestyle, and so on. So they are changing the category. By that, they are creating the bigger addressable market, of course. So it's a smart move. Okay, so coming back to the active customers, which I mentioned on the beginning, they changed from 241 million to 281 million. So although the revenue is maybe not that much growing or maybe quite constant, the number of the customer increased. The same situation is with the number of the orders. We had 970 million orders. And now in 2026, they have 1.09 billion orders. So the number of the orders increased. And this is okay. I mentioned this before, but much more interesting number related to the number of the customers and the number of the orders is the frequency of the ordering. And that frequency is remaining stable. So this means although the number of the customers increasing, this means those customers are not just customer like that, they are buying. And this means the platform is not suddenly irrelevant. It's still interesting. It's still relevant for the customers. So this means the business model is still working. Okay, so there is also one interesting number that everybody is communicating in the moment and telling how SHEIN is working bad or having a trouble. There is a reported loss of 99 million in the first quarter. But I don't think that this number is interesting or that it's so important, because most of that part is actually related to the redeemable preferred shares. So it's not really related to the business case. For me, and the margin is more interesting, and of course the cost structures. And we will chat a little bit about that in a couple of seconds. So what I think is not good, the margin, operational margin, which they had, and it was 3.9%, declined to 2.9%. This is probably not that good number, of course, but it's still okay, especially if we see that the margin in the service part is double that high, as I mentioned in the beginning. And this is now a reason why they're moving to the service business, of course. If we analyze a little bit the costs in those documents, then we can see also something interesting, and I think very clear and logical what is happening. So we see that the marketing expenses are increasing from 12.2% from the turnover or from the revenue to 15.8%. So from my point of view, it is showing actually that SHEIN knows exactly what they have to do. They have to invest in the marketing strategies to convince the people that image is not that bad as sometimes people think, and to cover, let's say, the change from the retailer to the service, because this is always very critical if you change the business like that. And one of the best ways to cover that and to make that successful is to invest, of course, in marketing. But this is also showing, of course, that they are investing more money in order to get customers at the same time. What is also interesting to see is that the fulfillment expenses increased, and they are now around 47.7% of the revenue. I'm not surprised about that, because it's getting more expensive, of course, to ship the items and the products from China to other parts of the world. You should know that SHEIN has approximately 7,500 contract manufacturers in China. This was in 2025. And the majority of the items are shipped from China, around 90%. This was the big advantage which they had, because they could ship, let's say, not that expensive products across the world through the logistic, which was actually okay. It was okay to pay. But now with tariffs, with increasing charges, with the geopolitical situation and so on, those costs are heavily exploding, actually. So the strategy which SHEIN has in order to cover that is to do kind of localized inventory. So to move that into the local hubs, logistic hubs, and then to ship the goods from those local hubs. This is okay, and this will for sure help to solve the part of the problem, but at the same time, it will eliminate, let's say, the advantage which they had during the shipments from China. So if we now make a small, let's say, recapitulation of all those most important parts, and at least that I think that are most important, we can see that actually this IPO is not just the strategy to collect the money. It's actually the strategy to get swap of the engines financed. So what they are doing, they are changing actually the engines during the flight to the moon, as I just said in the beginning. And there are actually three topics or three engines that they are changing in the moment, at least how I see that. The first one is geographical dependency. So they are moving from the United States and Europe to the other parts of the world. So it's a strategical change of the focus. This is a big issue. And I mentioned you the numbers. We see that in the first quarter, that part of the other side, let's say, of the world increased, the revenue increased and grew by 10%. So this is quite an interesting number. The second engine which they are changing is actually the business concept from the retailer or model from the retailer to the marketplace. I don't think that they will stop being the retailer, but they will simply push more the marketplace idea. And the numbers are showing that, definitely. And then we have a third, let's say, engine which they are trying to change, and this is actually moving from the business model where they are shipping directly from China to the end user. They will ship in the future from the local inventory hubs to the user, and they will focus more on the local or regional compliance topics, because this is the part or the biggest challenge which they face today all around the world. So that's why the IPO for me it's not actually way to finance the growth. They don't want that. They want to finance the reinvention of the business model. And this is much more interesting and much more important from my point of view, and probably for them as well. So before we finish the session for today, and I was not too long, I hope, yes, that was okay. So before we finish session for today, let's ask a very simple question. What do you think? And please comment this session in this video. What do you think? Is this change of the business model realistic? Will they be successful? Can SHEIN be successful? Or do we see just in the moment how one very interesting rocket is actually falling down? That can be as well. I would be very keen to understand, what do you think about that? I hope you enjoyed this small discussion about SHEIN. Very interesting company, and I'm sure we will see lots of interesting activities coming from SHEIN around the world. I wish you all the best, and let's talk again next week on Wednesday in the next episode of Retail Talks. Thank you very much, and see you next week again.